time, a-holes.
Hey everybody, Guardians of the Galaxy review. We're going to start off with a spoiler-free review for the first 5, 10, 15 minutes, however long we get into it. We don't know. That's the wonder of life. And then after that, we're going to have a spoiler-filled discussion bridged with the crazy incident that happened at Matthew Owens Theater. I'm Matthew Fave. Matthew Owens, how are you?
I'm doing good, man. How about you?
I'm good. All right, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yeah, let's kick this off. Let's go.
Is it worth watching? Is it worth buying? Because you're most likely going to have to pay for a 3D ticket. What do you think?
Yep.
If people like the first one, go see this one?
Yeah, I think there's a lot of differences between Guardians 1 and Guardians 2.
Mm-hmm.
It doesn't live up to Guardians 1. I mean, Guardians 1 was such a hard movie to live up to. But as a base thing, if you're a Marvel fan and you enjoyed the first film, yeah, go see this movie. I saw it in 2D. Did you see it in 3D?
Yeah, I had no option for 2D. I'm so tired of watching movies in 3D. It rarely adds anything. It makes everything darker. It makes them more blurry. I will say that for the most part of this movie, I forgot I was wearing the glasses.
Good.
And that's good. So that's nice. But there are some other ones. I had to watch Resident Evil, the last one, the Hope to God. It's really the final chapter.
Yeah.
And like Paul Anderson's style of editing is so fast that the frames would actually bleed into each other because of it.
It would probably get really bad with 3D. I could imagine that's not very fun. But Guardians worked out 3D wise because Marvel usually does a pretty decent job.
Yeah, it was nice. It was. I mean, it wasn't perfect, but like I said, I often forgot. So yeah, I'd watch it in 3D. I saw it in Ultra AVX.
Whoa. And I would say if you want to watch it in 2D, it works just as well there. Well, I can't speak on the 3D, but 2D is a viable option.
Absolutely. As always. I can't wait for this phase to be over forever, if it ever is. So you were saying some big differences between these two.
Yeah.
What do you think? What do you think about that?
You want to set it up real quick, just for those who are maybe because this movie, the thing I think about Guardians 2 is we've been talking about Harry Potter quite a bit, and a lot of the things we talked about in Harry Potter Goblet of Fire kind of echo here. Guardians 2 seems like it jumps from set piece to set piece and doesn't settle down in any one story. It's a collection of subplots, more than one stringent plot, which is interesting because in a way it breaks up the ensemble. You have different characters doing different things. Mm-hmm. If you enjoy the characters, I would say yeah, but there is a significant there's something missing from the film. I'm not sure if it's the heart, if it's the mystery the first one kind of had. I wasn't as gripped on the emotions. So overall, it is a bit of a weaker step, but it still has a lot of the great stuff we like about Guardians, the humor, the action, great uses of color and stuff like that. But I think when you compare it to Guardians 1, and that's hard not to do, it does come off a teeny bit hollow, but more in the minute-to-minute action is great. It's fun. It's all over the place. I think as a paced movie, as a standalone thing against the rest of the Marvel Cinematic Universe, I think Guardians 2 props itself a lot upon the fact of it's part of the MCU. You can just say, all right, yeah, forget about that, whatever, that's a little thing, and just kind of go about it. I think it's a good popcorn film. If you pay too much attention to the little stuff in between, you're not going to get a bunch because it's not a movie that bounces off of the Avengers. It's not a movie that bounces off a bunch of things. It's its own thing, and it's not a deep or complex story as the first Guardians, right? But it's still an enjoyable one. What did you think about? I guess the whole entire theming and the way it works out.
It's I will say for the most part the story, it doesn't hit too deep. I don't think they were ever really attempting to go too deep, and like you said, they do jump from spot to spot. There's sort of the main antagonist they bring in because they need to bring in a first antagonist. They just they seem quite a bit like filler. They're sort of like an opening act for the main problem. And I actually had no problem with that. Just to sort of summarize, I'd say I really enjoyed it. I thought it was a great. I think as a film, it's a little tighter than the first Guardians. I don't think it could ever match the surprise because I think the first Guardians came in and Marvel cared so little about the first Guardians of the Galaxy. They actually trusted one guy to direct it.
Yeah, and that's why it was so good. It was so good because Guardians of the Galaxy was never your Iron Man. It's never your Spider-Man. It was a B comic that barely anybody really paid attention to. Mm-hmm. So it was really the first Marvel movie that they kind of just let loose with, and it paid off. And I think that's I think they almost let a little bit too loose with 2, but I'm sure we'll talk about that as we get into the spoiler kind of stuff.
I would say, although I never expected it to hit any sort of deep narrative moments or emotional moments, By the time they wrapped everything up in the ending, I felt pretty touched by that. So I think that the emotional core, especially near the end, really pulled everything together. This movie is all about character, charisma, the incredible cast, and the chemistry that they all have with each other. And it's all about jokes. I think that there's maybe a few too many jokes. There were a couple scenes that could have been a little stronger dramatically, and we're supposed to set up some events that would happen later on in the movie, and then there was always punctuated with a joke. And if they weren't punctuated with a joke, they were punctuated with a very cute baby Groot, and it just so obviously was paraded in front of you like this little puppy over and over again.
There's a specific scene that we'll talk about in the spoiler section, but what you just said is perfect. The thing about Guardians 1 is it had a good balance of both action and comedy. It was comedic, but it was because they're all kind of silly. Guardians 2, like you said, every single scene doesn't have the capacity to be serious because every scene preceding it ends with a joke. Whether or not it hits, it doesn't. But the problem is as the movie continues...
It's like a joke memento. It always ends, the joke starts
That's what
everything.
I'm saying. As you continue through the movie, at no point can you be... I'm waiting every single scene to be like, okay, where's the punchline that isn't really needed? And I think that is the biggest downfall of Guardians is that, we can talk about this stuff. So what we're going to do is let's just set up the movie very, very briefly because we don't want to touch on any spoilers. So you have the Guardians and they're on an adventure. It doesn't really matter what it is because it's not tied to anything. They're fighting a big old beast as these credits play out. And then you find out they are working for these gold people. I forget the actual name of the group because they're not...
Doesn't matter.
Yeah, they're in the background. They are working for these gold people. Rocket steals some batteries because he's a klepto, and now the gold people are chasing after them. That worked for the beginning for me because, hey, it's cool. I just want to see some fun stuff. But they use them as a platform for the rest of the movie. Then you get this Kurt Russell's character comes down, and he is introduced as Star-Lord's father. This was all in the trailers. This is the first maybe 5 minutes of the movie. The thing is the movie very much wraps around that whole entire story. In fact, I would say the theme of Guardians of the Galaxy 2 is family. From every subplot between Nebula and Gamora and their things as being sisters, Rocket and his lack of having a family, all these kind of things play out.
Even the gangs.
Exactly. Yeah. It's very much about family and stuff like that. But the overt use of comedy and sometimes them dwelling on the jokiness and the slapstick of it all kind of hurts the emotional impacting it could have. But the movie, for most part, is just kind of action set up into this whole family thing, and it's very character centric. So what you don't have in Guardians 2 is a very central and antagonizing force. You don't have a Thanos. You don't have anything to root against. As I had said, it's funny because these gold people, the entire reason they're chasing down the Guardians the entire time is because Rocket stole their thing. They're not doing anything insightfully. I mean, they're annoying characters by design, but I guess when you look at the facts of it, they don't do really anything wrong. They're just trying to, equate it out. So I think that whole entire thing was kind of wore a little bit thin. But it changes up as we go into the movie, and we won't talk about that because spoilers.
But see, I didn't mind their motivation being a little thin and being a bit more. I didn't look at it as thin. I looked at it as realistic. And there's another when we start learning a bit more of the backstory of Nebula.
Yeah.
I really enjoyed that because I think it painted her as a much more three-dimensional character.
I like Nebula quite a bit.
She wasn't just a mindless killer. Once you hear her history, I thought, I couldn't relate to it,
but it makes her more empathetic. Before she was kind of a one note, just I'm gonna kill everything, and then you get to see a lot of Nebula. The thing is, I think they add a lot more characters that sometimes, like Drax, kind of ended up not really doing a whole lot. He had some cool moments, but he wasn't an integral part.
They just gave him all the jokes.
Yeah, and that's like, you see different people, but Groot is just baby Groot the entire time. There's really, everyone does their own thing, but there's so many different subplots that kind of mess it up. We'll talk about that in spoilers, but I think it's definitely a little bit of a rougher movie, but it's not a bad movie by any. I mean, it's good. I wouldn't say it's any of the best. I wouldn't say it's like up there. I would say it's towards the top of the Marvel films, definitely, because there's some pretty bad ones, but I wouldn't say it's like the top 3 or 4. Like it's good. It's not something you're going to rewatch a million times like you did with Guardians 1. I can say that with
Yeah, I think
maybe that's just me.
I don't have any desire to watch it again, although I had a great time watching it the first time because it flips from piece to piece. And I think the biggest problem for me with this movie was that there was no sense of drama or stakes or danger
Everything was a joke.
Everything was a joke, and like when the enemy is shooting at them or they're running away, it just seems like the enemies miss when the plot needs the enemies to miss. And you never at one time. I mean, this is a pretty tough example, but the other day I rewatched Mad Max Fury Road. And that is a masterpiece of a movie in terms of having a singular vision and also constantly raising the stakes, showing you what the antagonists can do to you, what they can do when they catch Tom Hardy. They do it, and you're constantly thinking, how are they going to get out of this one? I never once thought or cared about that in Guardians of the Galaxy. There was that part of adventure was just totally killed for me.
I think they actually did the opposite. We won't talk about it because spoilers, but we'll get into it. But as the movie progressed, I think the stakes were actually lessened as character things came to light. It got less dramatic, less like you said. At a certain point, it was just kind of like, oh, it's happening. We'll talk about it. But yeah, I mean, I think we have a good idea of the film. I think it's a good time. What I will say is there's two main points because everybody loves two things about Guardians of the Galaxy. They love how colorful and crazy it is, and they also love the soundtrack. And I will say I was definitely disappointed with the soundtrack this time along. It was good, but it didn't have any standout tracks. And maybe that's because the first one tied those specific tracks to very emotional moments in the film. It was just kind of lost on me. But the art design, the use of color as a tool is very, very well done. I was very impressed with some of the set pieces, sometimes just the minimalistic style of them. It's a very, very good looking movie, and it's very visually stimulating film. I think it's a little bit sometimes more styled over substance, but as far as visuals go, I think this is kind of up there with Doctor Strange, as some of the inventive uses of color are really, really great.
Yeah, I had a great time looking at it. The great time with the charisma, the banter, the chemistry. It was just shallow, save for sort of the deeper story. I think the deeper story punch at the end really saved it for me and brought it up. I'm going to guess that my star rating might be a little higher than yours. I'm going to give this one a 4.
Actually, that is my star rating. Mine is a 4 out of 5.
There were some points where I was really swept up with it, and like right in the middle, I'm like, oh, this could be a 5. Oh, it could be. But then I just thought, when I looked back at it and was trying to reflect, I mean, there were some parts. You were asking me about the certain scene we won't talk about yet, and I thought, I don't even remember that happening.
Yeah, it all kind of falls together because no one plot is really standoutish. I mean, there's one they're trying to follow, but it doesn't really have any more stakes than in the other subplots. Yeah. So you have a collection of stories as the Guardians work their way through, and at the end of the day, it's a collection of stories, and how those stories affect you is how emotionally gripping the film is going to be, and it just wasn't as effective as the first one was when it came down to gripping narrative. Not to say that a gripping narrative is the only thing that makes a film good, but it does definitely contribute to having a fulfilling time at the theater. But It's a Marvel film. It's a superhero film, guys. It's okay.
Yeah, Marvel is putting out so many movies, they're creating their own scale of grading.
Oh, yeah, exactly. But 4 out of 5 stars, I can easily recommend it.
There you go. So if you haven't watched it and you don't want to hear anything about this, moving forward, from now on in this video, we are going to be spoiling the crap out of it. So
let me tell my little story.
Okay. So the story's not going to have any spoilers in it.
No,
so
if you want to stick around
for the story, do that. But after that, goodbye.
After this, if you guys want to avoid spoilers, please
avoid.
All right,
so you're going to tell us what it's like to go watch a movie in your state.
Okay, so I went to my local film, my cinema, if you would say so. Saw it at a 9 p.m. showing, just like anybody else. And like I said, no spoilers here, guys. But I'm watching the film, and about 20 minutes into the film, I get an email on my phone. It's from a client, so I actually get up and I go kind of stand by the side, kind of where the entrance is, to check my phone. I don't want to be rude. So I'm standing there, and as I'm looking at this message on my phone, the door to the theater opens up, and a guy in probably mid-30s just yells "Bazooka" in a booming voice, and I turn to him and I say, pardon my French, I say, "Fuck you, asshole," and he closes the door. And at that point, I was like, okay, I can either pursue this or I can just let it go. I had to go to the bathroom, so I was like, all right, let's go. So I exit the theater, and there's a bunch of employees standing around there, just kind of shooting shit, talking whatever. Yeah. I know most of these kids, so I look to them and I say, who was that? And they're like, what are you talking about? I'm like, the guy who just yelled in the theater, who was that?
Bazooka Joe.
yeah, Bazooka Joe, this guy, and they're just like, we don't know what you're. So I turn the corner and I see him kind of perusing up at the concessions, to which I cuss him out again, and then notice that there's children around, and okay, I should probably bring it down. He doesn't say anything to me, continues walking. So I walked out and I decided I was gonna have a cigarette because I was feeling a little bit anxious, and I was like, all right, I'm gonna have a cigarette and just whatever, level it out. The guy doesn't leave. He doesn't come outside at any point. So I was like, all right. It wasn't like it was a big deal to me. I just was kind of upset that somebody would yell loudly in the middle of a movie on the night it opens, the premiere. It's super rude to do that. And it affects people like me who are trying to see it for business and not just, sit around and have a good time. So when I go back into the theater, I watch about, maybe 15, 20 more minutes of the film. And then at a certain part, I see the manager, who I know, and he's trying to kind of look for me, find me in the audience. So I just get up and I go down. And then I get meted by two police officers. And now we are discussing the build of this guy and what he looks like. And I'm relaying. And we're in the office and we're looking at cameras. And, I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, I'm probably missing something great in this film right now. But then I'm like, you know what? It's not every day that someone is that stupid in the year 2017 that they're going to yell about explosives at a superhero midnight launch. Now, I mean, yeah, as a story itself, yeah, a guy yells in the middle of the theater,
Bazooka.
whatever. Yeah, but it's so weird. At first, I was like,
bomb.
"Is that?"
I mean, people are rarely smuggling like a 6-foot-long bazooka over their shoulder.
I was confused because I was like, "All right, maybe it's a joke that Drax says in the and I just didn't get there yet," which it wasn't. Some guy just randomly decided to yell bazooka. And the thing that perplexes me is when we went back and watched on the video, you see him walk in the theater and then, leave 2 seconds later. And then I come out after him. And it's kind of like this little cat and mouse chase as he runs like a 12-year-old child. This is a grown man we're talking about.
Right.
Runs to the opposite side of the theater and goes and hides in the bathroom. And it's just like, okay,
Benny
man.
Hill sketch.
Yeah, exactly. And it was one of those surreal moments in which I am standing there and going, did I just condescendingly cuss out an adult, somebody who is obviously 15 years my elder, for yelling in the middle of a film on its if it wasn't that long ago that somebody came in and shot up a whole group of people watching a Batman film, guys. The last thing you want to do is yell in a theater, especially on an opening weekend. In general, you don't want to yell because it's rude. The last thing you want to do is yell about weaponry, explosives, anything that could potentially incite panic, especially when you're in a giant town. And I'm not saying we're a small town. There's a lot of people. If these people would have stampeded out of the film, you're talking about 200 people crawling over each other. So it was just this surreal moment, which I'm being asked by the police what the make and the build of a man who yelled something simple. It's a modernization of the world we live in that completely was crazy. Luckily, I got a perfect summary of everything that happened in the parts that I missed, and I kind of ended up leaving at the parts that were the most downtime. But it was amazing. It was amazing that there's really that stupidity in the world. So I guess Matt,
you go to movie theaters all the time. You're surrounded by that kind of
stupidity. That's what I'm saying. You see people on their phones. You see people talking. When I went and saw the Fast and the Furious 8, there was people who were talking in the theater, and that's fine. But never have I seen somebody who wasn't a part of any group. Just a man by his lonesome deciding to open a door and yell into a movie theater about for no seeming reason. It was the most weird and the weirdest thing. And the fact that I happened to be standing right by the exit, so the guy kind of yelled it at me, was just it was too coincidental to not follow up. So yeah, I went to the Guardians of the Galaxy showing and I got a little bit of a police interrogation along with it. But it's all because of one person. So as a moral of the story, guys, don't be rude in theaters and don't yell about weapons and stuff. Because
Guardian of the theater.
Exactly. Yeah. So I guess I was a little bit guarding the theater. But now, as Matt said, if you haven't seen the film yet and you're still with us, you're going to want to pack up. Yeah, spoiler time.
Let's talk about this first scene. I think the first scene is a great microcosm of the movie. In the opening scene, we have them fighting. They're all buddies and they're on a mission. And they're fighting a CGI monster that is not dangerous. And even though all this action is going on, the camera will only focus on Groot dancing.
I kind of got annoyed a little bit.
For a really long time. I mean, the joke was funny for about 15 seconds or so, and then it just kept going and going. And then I thought, okay, they're going for like a C3PO R2D2 crossing the Tantive 4 in A New Hope. But I mean, that was funny for 2 seconds. And then they moved on to something more dangerous. And in A New Hope, there were rebels getting murdered.
Let's I'm going to jump off of you. The scene that I was talking about earlier. Okay, so there's a scene in which they're preparing for the final act of the film. They're trying to take down Kurt Russell, who becomes evil. They're trying to plant an explosive, and they're trying to explain it to Groot, who was a baby. Rocket's trying to explain it, and at one point, Rocket turns to Peter Quill, who they're in the middle of this big old firefight, and he goes, "Hey, do you have any tape?" And it was like a funny little joke. He's like, "I want to tape off the incorrect button so Groot doesn't freak out." Then we hit audio of Peter Quill, Chris Pratt's character, yelling to each Guardian character if they have any tape. And then, is Scotch tape okay? No, it wasn't. Well, then why'd you even say? And,
right.
And then he's getting shot at by lasers. And this scene goes on for like 25 seconds. And the whole time I'm sitting there going like, okay, the joke was a teeny bit funny when you first said it. I'm literally pulled out of the movie. I was pulled out of the movie, and I'm like, who thought this was a funny joke for that long?
Well, and it's also meant to be one of the most exciting and dangerous parts, and now it's obviously not dangerous because he went from dodging all this gunfire and shooting back to just floating there and talking to Rocket through a hole.
And the whole problem is what it does is it sacrifices the moment for the comedy, and the comedy's not there, so all you get is, I missed a cool fight scene, or I wasted screen time, because none of that 30-second scene was funny. None of it was anything that drew any, it didn't go anywhere. It was just a joke that fell flat, and it was a waste of time, especially in the climax of the movie when we're having crazy amounts. And that was something that kind of annoyed me about the beginning scene too. They're fighting this creature that looks like pulled directly out of Star Wars Episode 7. There's all this crazy use of color. It's puking up rainbows and stuff, and we just get to watch Groot dance. And it's like, okay, that was funny when it was the end credit sequence of Guardians of the Galaxy 1. I like the wink, but I don't like spending literally the entire credit sequence watching Baby Groot dance while there's an explosively cool visual effects scene going on in the background. And I felt like that was oftentimes what we got.
It was metaphorically and symbolically out of focus while Groot was in focus.
Moving on. So we talked about the gold people. That thing really goes nowhere. There was a few parts.
I liked them as villains. I didn't need them to be too deep. I liked them to just kind of be the people they were, and they were there to just push them towards Kurt Russell and give you this fake enemy until Kurt Russell was revealed to be the ultimate enemy, which really wasn't much of a surprise. They seemed. I mean, the problem with them is that they were just shooting and shooting and shooting, and it never really seemed to be a problem. And then they were finally surrounded by them, and then Kurt Russell comes in and kind of saves the day. I think that was probably the best action, was going through the asteroid field, because this was the only time we saw the ship get damaged and there actually be a problem and a consequence to their bickering. So, and that was good. And then to be sort of surrounded and you're like, okay, well, they might lose here and they needed to be saved. So that part I liked. I thought was the most effective action, and everything other than that just felt a little bit fluffy.
I honestly thought the meteor scene, which is really cool, they're flying through this meteor scene, or this asteroid belt kind of thing, while meteors pop into existence, and it's all swifting around them while they get chased by hundreds upon hundreds of these Sentinel ships and stuff. And I liked it, but once again, I think I was still kind of annoyed at the intro scene. So when the first big scene is immediately them bickering and that's what caused them to lose, in my mind I was like, okay, that's annoying to me. And it was comedic. But now that you said what you've said, I can understand that. So I think as an action scene that worked out really, really great. And I liked it.
It feels like a sitcom.
Yes, it does. It feels like they're always bickering, and at this point, Guardians of the Galaxy was more focusing on how silly all the Guardians were versus how cool the space action was, and that was something I liked a lot about Guardians 1, was the dog fights and stuff like that, and you kind of miss some of those cool moments because they're trying to focus on the joke. Moving forward, Kurt Russell, that guy got a lot of screen time. I thought the intro scene with them driving in Missouri in 1980 and him planting the kind of you just get a look at Kurt Russell through like a weird CGI kind of like, now he's younger and has long hair. You get to see him with Peter Quill's mom, so you immediately know that that's his dad. He got way, way, way more screen time than I thought, even more so than some of the other Guardians. And like Matt said, it's because he ends up being the villain. But the way they go about the revelation of that villain doesn't really work out, because the second act of this movie is so concerned with like all the other things going on. So simultaneously, not only do you have Peter trying to figure out who his dad is, and if whether or not Kurt Russell's trying to pull a fast one on him and Gamora are doing that. They're also trying to figure out Mantis, this character who's kind of like the sidekick to Kurt Russell's. His name is Ego, so I'm just gonna say Ego from now on. Kurt Russell's character, so the side girl. Then you have Gamora and Nebula. Now they have a little spat, and Nebula has a thing. And then on the other side of this, you have Yondu, the Ravager, and Rocket Raccoon and Baby Groot, who have been captured by the Ravagers. So there's all these things going on at once.
Yeah.
And instead of the second act being like kind of just a one straight through, it's a whole bunch of stuff. So what out of this did you feel? Because obviously they're trying to focus on the Kurt Russell, Peter Quill storyline thing, but which one did you think was the most effective? Because I thought the most effective subplot was the Nebula Gamora subplot, to be honest.
Yondu, baby.
Yeah, okay, I liked Yondu a lot, but I liked his character. I didn't really like the whole, like, I like Yondu as a character and I like his story. I just didn't think it was the most interesting thing in Guardians 2. But if there was a Yondu movie, like, yeah, I'm down.
Yondu, cool. I think with Yondu, the ending was obviously, yes. I mean, they wanted to set that up, and I felt like that was I loved the ending. I loved how Yondu made the big sacrifice at the end.
Yeah.
And I think that because they gave so much time to Kurt Russell's character, and it just felt like it was going to be Kurt Russell. It's just so obviously Kurt Russell when you cast somebody like that.
That's what I'm saying. At no point was I like, that is Ego, Star-Lord's father. I'm like, it's Kurt Russell. It's Kurt Russell.
I mean, I think they focused so much on Ego and Quill because they kind of wanted to hide the revelation of Yondu, where he kind of came around and showed what it really is to be a dad. It was kind of like a goofy version of Star Wars, where Yondu was the Darth Vader, and he's like, Star-Lord, I wasn't your father, but I am your daddy.
Yeah, that was the line. I think they wrapped it up really well. I thought it was kind of weird that they ended on such a sad note, but I think the Gamora Nebula storyline worked well because it was a transformation of Nebula, who, like we said earlier, she was a one note, and then she became multifaceted. But you also learned just how cruel Thanos was.
Yep.
Because Thanos has kind of just existed in this kind of bubble. The only reason you know anything about Thanos being more than just a big villain is something you've inferred or read because of comic books. So it was good to get like first-hand tales of like, he used to replace me with robot pieces every time I would lose a friendly fight with my sister Gamora. And it's like, wow, that is kind of messed up. So I thought that was good. Mm-hmm. But the eventual revelation of Yondu and the way that all worked out, I thought that was really, really good. And the ending scene with just the fireworks and all that stuff, like, once again, great use of color, really, really good palette. It's good to see a film embrace the color palette. Here's something I want to talk about.
All right.
Cameos, because long ago there was something called like a nod, a cameo. We saw that Stan Lee is always in the films. He's a cameo. There was like 4 cameos in this movie, and Stan Lee isn't even a cameo at this point. Now he's confirmed as a in-character or in-universe character.
Yeah, I mean, he was just Stan Lee sitting on an asteroid having a prolonged scene where we cut back to a few times.
Yeah, he's essentially now Stan Lee's cameo wasn't just Stan Lee being a dude. He's an astronaut stranded talking to these guys, this group of watchers, observers, and there is a telltale line, which if you miss it, you'll never know. But he does say, he looks to one of the guys. He says, "Oh, that's when I was in that one. I was a federal, whatever FedEx is long for." Or FedEx is short for.
Right.
He's like, yeah, I was a FedEx employee. And he's referring to when he was in another film. So that makes Stan Lee as a character an actual character. He's not just a cameo. Then we have Howard the Duck.
Yeah.
Just like, again, which, okay, he was a cameo in the first one, but Howard the Duck casually in there. And the biggest one, which pops up directly kind of towards the end of the film. And once again, this is one of the things where it was an empowering moment that was kind of cut by a joke. This time it worked, but you remember this, obviously, when Kurt Russell's face is transforming. He's becoming...
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, you go ahead. What was it, Matt? Who did we get?
It was David Hasselhoff.
Who's been getting a lot of love. He gets a lot
flesh.
Of pop culture love. Yeah, and he's in the movie. It's not just some weird CGI thing. He's there. He's totally there. And so that was weird. It seemed like Guardians was kind of that. Guardians was very much a collection of things. Set pieces, subplots, cameos, nods, jokes, and they worked, they didn't work. They kind of all did different things.
It was like watching one of those VH1 shows. Hey, remember the 80s?
Exactly. And a lot of it did work. A lot of it didn't work. It's wishy-washy, but then again, it's Guardians of the Galaxy. And I think what's weird is I think that this movie is more what people would have expected if they said they were making a Guardians of the Galaxy movie before 1 came out.
Sure.
It's kind of goofy. It's not as top tier as your Spider-Mans, your Iron Mans, your Superman, whatever. It's not up there, but it's definitely a good time, and it's just as weird and goofy as the comic is. But yeah, I think in general, that's kind of all I got to say about Guardians, spoiler-wise. Was there anything, we talked about a few scenes, but I mean, they didn't do much for me. Was there anything specifically scene-wise you want to talk about? Because there's quite a few parts in this movie. You got the whole ending thing with the brain. That was cool looking. The prison escape scene. Everything feels bitty, I guess. Now, as I'm talking, I'm remembering like, oh, there was the scene where Rocket was making fun of the other Ravager guy for what his face looked like or his name or something.
No, I thought that was brutal. That taser face joke.
Yeah, no, I thought it was a garbage scene, but I'm remembering them because it's just like it feels like it's
that's one of those scenes where there's because they force so many of these jokes, and then oftentimes they'll make the characters laugh. And Batista can pull off the fake laugh.
That's what I was gonna say.
That's part of his character. But when everyone else starts doing the fake laugh as well, it gives me flashbacks to listening to Hermione do a fake laugh for the one scene they need to film in Harry Potter, so that they have a flashback when Harry tells Voldemort about love.
Pro tip to the trailer makers: try not to waste your best jokes or your third act jokes in the trailer. There's a trailer. It's like the first trailer where Mantis gets hit in the head. It's a cool epic shot of all the characters, and then Mantis gets hit in the head with an asteroid, and Drax is like, watch out!" And that shit would have been hilarious had I not already seen it 3 times in every single trailer that I'd seen. And I was like, okay, that was the cool moment that was really going to be a good payoff, but you ruined it in the trailers. So
I love that bit because it reminded me of there's a great YouTube video of it's a baby trying a kale smoothie, and the baby like sips it at a picnic at a park, and then you're sitting there waiting for its reaction, and then a soccer ball smacks it from off camera.
Yeah, no, and that's perfect. It's the visual distraction that makes the joke, but it's like I saw it. I would say the best joke in this film, or the best sight gag, is when I think it's Rocket and all of them, and they're taking like a pretty brutal tumble through rocks or something. The ship is crashing,
right?
And then you see all their reactions, and they're all frizzled, and then you just get a deadpan look of Groot, and like after 2-second pause, he just pukes on himself. That was funny.
And
okay, that was
the CGI
good.
in that puke was beautiful. I could feel it. What were we just talking about? The jokes hitting them. Oh, when I was in this theater, I felt like, you ever go to a theater and you feel like you are so in the minority of what you think is funny, where people
like everybody's laughing.
Everyone's laughing at like the really fucking dumb stuff, and then where Rocket describes he's like, I saw a man on that ship. He was like this big. And the joke is that obviously he wouldn't be that big. He was like, well, he's close to be bigger. And then as he's making this huge dramatic entrance, that's when Drax goes, I bet it's the 3-inch man. And I thought that was so funny.
Yeah.
Like, what a nice callback. And then I laughed. I was the only one in the theater that laughed. And then I instantly thought, oh, my laugh is terrible. I sound like an idiot.
Well, and it's weird. It's because it's like it shows how many different layers of comedy a movie can have. I found the stuff that was funny was the stuff that they weren't really even trying to shoot for. The quips and the little the looks and the kind of the actors doing their own thing. I think the jokes didn't really work, but the jokey atmosphere did. A lot of Drax's things, when Drax has one-liners, that worked. I think they just tried to up it as, I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy, when you look at like how IMDb or a movie website would kind of be like, this is what genre it is no longer action, adventure, drama, comedy. It's comedy action. That's all it is. There's no drama. There's no adventure. I mean, there's an adventure, but it's first and foremost a comedy. You know, like they value the comedy in Guardians more than they value the action. You see that in the beginning credits, and you see it throughout the film. So
the comedy undermines all the action. I didn't feel anything from the action. Like when I remember Indiana Jones running away from a ball, I really think he could die. Or you think of the last, some of the final scenes in Indiana Jones where you watch another character die from making a mistake that he could easily make. Like you need to have some kind of stake, and there's just no stake at all.
We almost forgot, and I'm glad we brought that up as we wrap this up. Don't tell the audience that your character is immortal before the third act, because then I'm not worried about him dying at all. The whole thing, the whole reveal is that Kurt Russell is a god, and therefore while he exists, Chris Pratt's character Star-Lord is a demigod. He can live. He's immortal. So when I get that revelation, before the action happens. And then the thing is they try to make a deal. Like Gamora's like, oh, where's Peter? Oh, like,
Oh,
is
that
he
was
get
so
hurt?
forced. This like
Yeah, and the
constant
thing is,
screaming of where he is, because you feel like at the time, like, just never for 1 second do you think he's not going to get out of there. And then right before that, there's that odd exchange where the gang leader wants to stay behind, and then he says, "I have to do this," and you're like, "What? Why are you staying behind?"
Yeah.
And then and then Rocket tells him, "I only have one of each," and you go, "Oh, I get it.
So
You're
he's
gonna
gonna
have to sacrifice
himself."
himself." Which the sacrifice scene was still effective. It's just the setup was like super heavy-handed.
It's kind of silly. It's, because for the most stakeful part, the climax of the film, we as an audience know he's immortal. It's only after they defeat Kurt Russell's character that his mortality is an issue. And it's kind of like in that way, like, yeah, Yondu has no clue that he's immortal, so he's helping him through and throughout. The problem is the movie does not acknowledge that it's told the audience. So when you have, like you were saying, 20 or 30-second scenes where the characters are worrying about whether or not he's alive, it does nothing for the audience to create suspense or tension, because we know for fact he is alive. Otherwise, the movie is betraying its own plot. So yeah, it was interesting. It was an interesting choice. I mean, they had to explain it, because there was some pretty cool parts where like Kurt Russell gets shot by all the Star-Lord shoots Kurt Russell at a point. Mm-hmm. That was really cool. But yeah, it really removed all the potential stakes. It made the third act kind of like, yeah, you want to see them win and you want to see them beat the enemy and save the universe or whatever. But even if worst case, Chris Pratt's still alive. If the whole thing blows up, the entire universe blows up, he'll still be there. So
well, he gave up his immortality.
Yes, exactly.
So that set up the final piece.
Yeah, exactly.
He could have died. They could have done the next one without him. Yeah, right.
It's not going to happen.
Well, overall, this movie was a really nice piece of nostalgic 80s candy that was very sweet and delicious and fun and brought back great memories and feelings. And even had a really nice finish that made up for a lack of depth within the middle. But like I said before, I have no desire to see this again, because all the jokes will have already been told, and there's really nothing else to draw you in. However, as a one-time viewing, I still think it's pretty damn strong.
I agree with you completely. I think as a one-time view, it's a great time. It's a roller coaster. It's great use of visuals. I mean, it's just visually alone. Mm-hmm. We got a lot of good visual films this year. Ghost in the Shell. These things look good. For $10, I will watch somebody create a visual, colorful, like cool thing to look at for 2 hours. That's cool. I think if you try to dig down and really look at like what the story means and all those kind of things, yeah, you'll have some disappointment. But at face value, when the jokes land, they land. When the action is great, it's fantastic. When the Guardians are like the Guardians, it feels like the movie Magic of One again. But it's in between, and it's got sequelitis, guys. But that doesn't mean it's a bad film. It's still a fun film. You just won't watch it 30 times like you did Guardians 1. It's simple.
There you go. There's a review on it. If you like it with someone, share. We'll have another Harry Potter review coming up for you next week. We'll be doing Order of the Phoenix. Spoiler
Phoenix
alert. My favorite so far.
I agree. All right, we'll catch you then, guys.
Bye for now.
If I touch someone,